We'll call the City Council regular meeting to order for Tuesday, June 20th, 2023. If everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Call the roll, please.
Mayor, Mayor Hoyt.
Here.
Councilmember Bernatz. Here. Councilmember Lean.
Here.
Councilmember Porter. Here. Councilmember Wilson.
Here.
All right. Any changes to the agenda? Nick?
None.
Holly?
No.
Katie?
None.
Steve? None. Lynn? Seeing no changes, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion. Second.
Motion by Holly, second by Katie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Moving on to item 5.1 under announcements will be our Park and Recreation Month proclamation. Kelly.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I guess actually good afternoon, Mayor and Council. For nearly 40 years, people in the United States have celebrated Parks and Recreation Month in July. This is to promote the power of parks and recreation in building strong, vibrant, and resilient communities, and to recognize the thousands of parks and recreation professionals, seasonals, and volunteers who maintain our country's local, state, and community parks. This year's theme, Where a Community Grows, celebrates the vital role parks and recreation professionals play in bringing people together, providing essential services, and fostering the growth of our communities. First of all, I would like to thank the Parks and Recreation staff, full-time, seasonals, part-time, for all they do. Without them, we wouldn't have the parks, the programs, the facilities we have. So a huge shout out to the staff. Secondly, to the volunteers. We have hundreds of volunteers annually, from Adopt a Park programs to pond and park cleanups to volunteer coaches to Rambling River Center Advisory Board and the volunteers at the center. So thank you to all the volunteers. We could not do what we do without the volunteers. And a special thank you to the Rambling River Center Advisory Board and to the Parks and Recreation Commission. A great group of men and women who give to the community, to the Parks and Recreation Department, and make our job very, very easy. So thank you to the Rambling River Center Advisory Board and the Parks and Recreation Commission. To celebrate Parks and Recreation Month, at the end of July, Friday, July 28th to be exact, we will be throwing a party at Lake Julia Park. Everybody's invited to attend. The party starts at 7 p.m. We'll have kids dance, playing some kids music. They do lots of dances and games and contests, so come out at 7 p.m. At about 8:40 p.m., we'll be showing the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So hopefully everybody can join us for that movie. We'll also have some games, some crafts, I believe popcorn, etc. I do want to thank our sponsors for the event, Farmington Youth Hockey Association, Marshall Line, Farmington VFW, Post 7762, and Park Dental. Like I said, Friday, July 28th, starting at 7 p.m. at Lake Julia Park. It is a free event. Everybody's invited to attend. Hopefully we'll get a number of different age groups for Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Tried to hit a movie that would span the decade. So like I said, come on out to that event. The action requested tonight is to proclaim July 2023 as National Parks and Recreation Month in the city of Farmington.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, we will read the Park and Recreation Month, July 2023 proclamation.
All right. Whereas Parks and Recreation is an integral part of communities throughout this country, including Farmington, and whereas Parks and Recreation promotes health and well-being, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks, and
whereas Parks and Recreation promotes time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being and alleviating illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's. And whereas Parks and Recreation encourages physical activities by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And
whereas Parks and Recreation programming and educational activities such as out-of-school time programming, youth sports, and environmental education are critical to child development, and whereas Parks and Recreation increases a community's economic prosperity, through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And
whereas Parks and Recreation is fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas the city's parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of Farmington and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And
whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and the City of Farmington recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now therefore, I, Joshua Hoyt, Mayor, on behalf of the Farmington City Council, do hereby proclaim July 2023 as Parks and Recreation Month. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Farmington, Minnesota to be affixed on this 20th day of June 2023. Thank you, ma'am. Moving on to item number 6, which is our citizen comments. If there's anyone in attendance wishing to speak at this time. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item 7, which is our consent agenda. Any changes to the consent agenda?
I will make a motion to approve.
All right, motion by Steve,
second.
second by Nick. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, and moving right along, we'll go to item 10.1, which is the amendment to a planned unit development, Trinity Care Center, 905 Elm Street. Tony.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Farmington Health Services requesting a third amendment to their planned unit development site plan for their property located at 905 Elm Street. The original PUD site plan was approved by council back in 2012 and contained certain changes to the site, which included construction of additional 10-bed group home for memory care residents, the demolition of the remaining hospital building, and construction of a utilities addition to the existing skilled nursing center, as well as the construction of 2 senior living apartment buildings that would be on the west side of the property. Since that original approval, there had been 2 amendments to that site plan, the first in 2016, and contained the following: the removal of those 2 senior living apartment buildings from the plan, adding a 29-unit nursing home addition near the north end of the site, providing a reduced front yard setback for the site from 25 feet to 18.5 feet, adding just under 6,000 square foot addition onto the north side of the existing nursing home for office storage and delivery space, and then showing a north-south access road that connects from 213th Street west south to the entry drive off of Elm Street. This also shows cross access to the Pelici hardware site, both at the north and south end of the site. And then the second amendment, which was done in 2019, again had a couple different changes, which included the removal of that north-south access road, as it was determined at that time the access is not needed for fire protection services. And the cross-access to the Pelici site was maintained with the second amendment as proposed, as a proposed access drive was shown that extends from the southern boundary of the Pelici site southeast to the Trinity entry. Cross-access was also provided on the north end of the Trinity site off of 213th Street to the parking lot on the north end of the hardware site. Necessary easements were required to be provided for the cross-access at those locations in order to ensure that those areas are available for construction of those accesses by the Pelicis. And then the third amendment, which is before you this evening, again includes 2 changes. It includes the removal / demolition of approximately 7,700 square feet of the existing nursing home portion of the facility, and then the construction of a 21,127 square foot addition on the east side of the nursing home facility. This addition will largely consist of additional storage area and additional 20 nursing home units. This addition will connect into the existing apartment building that's located on the northeast portion of the site, as well as the group home memory care unit that's located on the southeast portion of the site. This is the existing site plan. The area that will be removed, these 2 wings, if you can see where my mouse is, these 2 wings here would essentially be the demolition portion that they're proposing. And then this hatched area is the new area that is being proposed, the 21,127 square foot area. So basically replacing that with where those two wings were previously located. This is the overall floor plan that is being proposed. This is the group home located at the southeast corner. They attach here with some storage and then a corridor here that leads into the new, basically, nursing home units. So, building elevations. The elevations will contain brick and ephes. They'll match into what's existing out there. So as far as the elevations are concerned, they fall right in line with what's previously out there. So no concerns there. As far as the bulk or zoning standards, current building coverage for the site's at about 20.3%. With the proposed site work, this coverage will increase to 22.7%. The property is zoned R4 and allows for a maximum coverage of 30%, so it's well below that requirement. Required setbacks in the R4, 25 feet front, side and rear 10. All setbacks are met with the proposed addition, as the addition's more located in the center of the site. A total of 183 off-street parking stalls are provided on site. This number does exceed the requirements under city code for a senior care facility. The Planning Commission did review the application at their June 13th regular meeting and recommended approval of these changes with a 4-0 vote. Therefore, the action that's requested this afternoon is adopt resolution number R44-23, approving a third amendment to the St. Francis Health Services of Morris Incorporated Planned Unit Development Site Plan.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, Katie?
No, I don't have specific questions. Thank you, Tony, for the very detailed, and applicant for the very detailed site plan here. One of those bittersweet needs that we like to see in our community, but St. Francis, aka Trinity, has been a wonderful wonderful part of our community, and we're glad to partner with them. And I don't see any issues with the proposal at this time, and trust the commission and your expertise on it. So thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, I would echo in part what Katie said. I mean, Trinity is such a valuable asset to our community. And it's, the population is aging, so they're able to serve those that are in need. And again, they give back in so many different ways to the community as well. Tony, I do have one question, and again, I do appreciate your presentation. And since we do have the fire chief and police chief here, can you guys confirm that that the access points, or that you have good access with this new addition? You've obviously reviewed it with Tony? Yep. Okay, good. That's all I have.
Nick?
Have they expressed any longer-term planning beyond this, or is this just kind of?
They have not. They kind of do it as their funding allows them to do it.
Sure. I was wondering if they were trying to run up to that 30% over time, or?
They haven't expressed that.
That would be many years out, I would assume anyway, so happy problem if they do get there, right?
Right.
So, that was all I had.
Holly?
I guess my only question has to do with projected timeline. Are they at capacity right now? And what is their expected timeline for starting or even completing this process?
I think the intent is to start yet this year.
Okay.
So.
All right. Those are the only questions I have.
I know this defaults more onto the contractor or the agency that will be doing the construction, but the means of egress for construction seem to be through the open space to the north. And I just think from proximity from 213th, just assuming that they'll be working through that space and there's no utilities, major gas lines, anything we have to worry about with the extra weight, or would they potentially be craning stuff through that open space?
That I don't know. There are basically two accesses to this site. You have the off of 213th here, and then you do have access off of the Hammerhead to the south. Right. I don't know that, they haven't indicated to me which way they're looking to access it for construction purposes. I'm guessing it'll probably be off of 213th off of the parking lot.
Okay.
Is my guess.
And that was kind of where I defaulted to, was just by distance and proximity. Just ensuring that the communication and, you know, the amount of traffic on 213th already, that can be an arduous process. And so
Absolutely.
when you start to demo things of that size, it's multiple trucks consistently, and just ensuring that we're not disrupting our neighbors and, more importantly, the residents of Trinity. So, all right, thank you, sir. Unless there's any other questions or statements, we would look for a motion to adopt resolution number R44-23, approving a third amendment to the St. Francis Health Services of Morris Incorporated Planned Unit Development Site Plan.
Motion.
Second?
Motion by Katie, second by Steve. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Bernatz.
Yes.
Councilmember Lean.
Yes.
Councilmember Porter.
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson.
Yes.
Mayor Hoyt.
Yes.
Thank
you, sir. Move on to item 10.2, which is the amendment to a planned unit development, Vita, Attiva at South Creek, 5140 216th Street West. Jared.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. So before you is another PUD amendment, this one for Vita, Attiva at South Creek. The applicant is Paul Whiteman, and this is for an amendment to the plan unit development agreement to allow a monument sign to be placed in between the amenities building and the stormwater pond. The city did enter into a PUD agreement with Vita Attiva back in 2021. This PUD agreement outlined approved deviations from zoning requirements such as reduced setbacks, lot sizes, and increased building coverage. So per city code, monument signs cannot exceed 50 square feet in area and 5 feet in height. The applicant initially proposed a monument sign that was 165 square feet in area and 5.5 feet in height. And at the June 13th PC meeting, the commission and several residents voiced concerns over the size of the sign, as it would be over 3 times the size allowed per code. And so as a result, the PC did recommend approval of the amendment on the condition that the height was reduced by 1 foot. So this would reduce the sign to 135 square feet in area and 4.5 feet in height. And the applicant did express with staff that they would be looking to reduce it even further to 117 square feet by reducing the width 4 feet. This came after the packet was due, so just want to let the city council know. The requested PUD amendment would allow this monument sign to deviate from the code requirement by allowing the sign to be a maximum of 135 square feet. So it would include if the sign did drop to 117 square feet. So here's a rendering of the sign. Again, the dimensions aren't updated per the Planning Commission's recommendation from last week, but it would be 30 feet wide, and that could be reduced to 26 feet, and then 4.5 feet tall. And it would be anchored in by 72-inch 4 steel square tubes into the ground at grade. So here's a rendering of it facing towards Eaton Avenue. I would like to note that's not to scale. The sign would be smaller than it appears now, but just gives everybody a visual reference of how it would look by the amenities building. So the action requested for you tonight is to approve the attached resolution approving the second amendment to the PUD agreement for Vita Attiva.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Katie?
No, I appreciate the inclusion of the email back and forth with a resident. That was helpful, and I'm glad you took that into consideration, as well as the Planning Commission's recommendation. Seems like all is in order to me, so I don't have any questions, but thank you, Jared, for your work on this.
Steve?
You know, Jared, is this one of those ordinances or provisions that the Planning Commission might need to kind of evaluate? Because I feel like a lot of our major developments do have a slightly larger monument sign. And I wish I had looked at mine and looked at a couple of others, but just kind of a thought.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely something we could look into. And Tony might be able to echo more on that.
I do know that the majority of the monument signs that are out there for developments do meet current code.
Oh, they do?
So-
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Good?
That's it.
Okay. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to see it come under 5, I guess. I'm less concerned about the width of it as much as not getting away from the height requirement. I don't want, precedent set to get up to a 15-foot someday, who's gonna have the largest one in town kind of thing, so. All good here?
Holly?
Well, actually, that is a question that I have is, if your comment on most of the signs being up to code right now, what sort of precedent does exist for us making that adjustment for signs? And is it something that we need to be concerned about in future for, developers or developments? Where if we're doing 117 and another developer comes in and sees that and they're like, oh, it's 120, or oh, it's 128. I just want to be a little bit careful that we don't start to get gigantic signs. So I guess I'm more curious is if we have done this before, how often have we done it? And is that something we do need to be concerned about in future?
Right, I'm not sure, I don't believe that we've done it before, but I would like to note it is a PUD, so it does offer the deviations from our city code, so it does allow for unique situations like that. And so we would review those as new developments come in, if they're going to be a PUD or not, and to allow for those deviations from the code.
Okay.
Good. Much like my peers have said, there's, anytime you have ordinances or codes that you deviate from, as a policymaker, you're always like, okay, what can of worms are we potentially opening, right? And who ultimately should be deciding what a sign looks like. Initially, when I looked at it, I cringed because I didn't see it. And I'm like, oh my God, that's such a huge sign, right? And then I saw it and I went, oh, see, that's kind of what I was envisioning, right? Something that's naturally fitting with the aesthetics of the development. I would make a recommendation to have the Planning Commission go back and look at the ordinance as it's written, because a sign of X size, if it were poly and backlit, we think of an old mobile sign, right? We would never allow something 75 feet, right? But things that are naturally cohesive and complementary to the design and the aesthetics of the area. I think the placement and the visibility from major thoroughways or arterials also plays in, and that those are the things that should be considered, in my opinion, above and beyond the size per se. If it meshes, looks good, and fits, size is a contributing factor, but bright mobile signs that are 135 feet, like under no circumstances, right? I mean, I think we can all say that would likely end up a no, but just something for them to consider looking through and, polishing something up and making it a little bit tighter. For sure. But otherwise, it looks great. I think it'll be a good addition to the development. So with that, we would look for a motion to approve and adopt the resolution number R45-23, approving a second amendment to the Vita Attiva at South Creek Plan Unit Development Agreement as it pertains to the monument sign to allow for a 135 square foot monument sign to be located at 5140 216th Street West.
Motion.
Motion by Steve.
Second.
Second by Nick. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Lean,
Yes.
Councilmember Porter,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Hoyt,
Yes.
Councilmember Burnett.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, moving on to new business. Item 12.1, our 2022 Annual Financial Report and Management Report. Chris.
Thank you, members of the mayor and members of the council. As you well know, the city goes through an annual financial audit every year. That audit process has now been completed. I've got Bill Lauer here with the city's audit firm, MMKR, and he's going to give a brief recap of the audit.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mayor, members of council, for making time for me on your agenda today. So figure out how I'm gonna.
Push the mouse once.
Okay.
There you go.
Ah, all right. What I'm going to do briefly here is, first of all, just go through kind of what our role is, what we do as auditors, how our responsibility for the 200 and some pages that you received in your packet, what part we played in that, and what management's role is in putting that together. and then go through kind of the other reports and letters that we issue as a result of the audit process. First thing on the financial statements themselves, all of the data, the disclosures that go into putting that document together is the responsibility of the city's management. Chris and his team get that all ready for us. We come out, perform the audit, provide the opinion as to whether that fairly presents your financial position for the year under audit and the results. As part of that process, we evaluate your internal controls over financial reporting. You do have an audit in accordance with governmental accounting standards, so you'll find a separate report letter on the city's internal controls and compliance over financial reporting in accordance with government auditing standards. And finally, all local governments like the city are subject to an audit of your compliance with Minnesota laws and regulations. There's an audit guide that the state auditor's office puts out and updates annually, kind of a compendium of laws that we have to test to make sure that the city is complying with local laws and regulations. So as far as the results of the audit this year, we were once again able to provide the city with what we refer to as an unmodified or clean opinion on your financial statements. We did not have any issues with the financial reporting in your statements from a government auditing standards standpoint. We did call out a change in the opinion this year. The city had to implement a new accounting standard, GASB 87, change the way you account for leases. In prior years, you didn't really see these showing up in your balance sheet. Basically, they're kind of going through as lease payments, either receipts or disbursements, depending on whether you're the lessor or the lessee. What this statement's doing is kind of making you acknowledge those agreements on your balance sheet. So city has one agreement with USDA where you're leasing space to them in this building where you're the lessor, so you're now seeing a lease receivable recorded on your financial statements, and a deferred inflow. Basically it's kind of an equal and offsetting thing, but it's kind of calling out that that agreement is in place. And then you do have some leases payable in addition, where the city's lessor, where you're leasing some vehicles. A lot of our cities are doing this now, kind of going to a leased fleet instead of purchase. So that's probably going to keep growing, but you're now seeing a capital asset. It's referred to as a right to use asset. Instead of a purchase, you've through that agreement acquired the right to exclusive use of those vehicles for a certain amount of time. So now you're seeing those on your entity-wide financial statements, both as a capital asset and that lease liability being reported as kind of equal offsetting long-term assets and liabilities. From an internal control standpoint, we had two things to report there. Number one, this is something that we've reminded the city about each year. You have a fairly limited number of employees in your finance department. So in some of your transaction cycles, you've got less than an optimal segregation of duties, where basically you've got individuals that have more touch points in a particular transaction cycle than you might if you had more people to spread those duties out to. And also, the city recorded a prior period adjustment in 2022 to recognize about $485,000 of revenue that should have really been recognized in previous years. And this relates to some developer deposits that were sitting on your balance sheet as cash and deposits receivable, but you actually performed the work for the city or incurred the cost for the city to take that into revenue before 2022, and so that process was kind of gone through and those accounts cleaned up, and it resulted in the city recognizing about $485,000 from work that you did prior to 2022. And anytime that we have a prior period adjustment like that, essentially that's saying that in prior years your controls over making sure that was recorded properly weren't working at that time. But I should also point out that that was something that was, essentially brought to our attention by the city. You did catch that in the course of doing your financial statement preparation for 2022. It was rectified, but we still have to cite that as something that basically wasn't working in the past. In addition, with the Minnesota legal compliance, we did not have any non-compliance that was cited for 2022. We do follow up on anything that we noted as a finding in prior years. In 2021, we did cite you for not paying one disbursement within the 35-day limit that's allowed under statute for claims for goods or services. We did retest that again this year, and everything that we tested was paid timely, so there was no repeat finding for that in 2022. Before I move on to just a few of the high-level financial results and numbers, are there questions on any of the reports that I've issued or opinions I've gone over?
I remember that comment from last year about the diversification of duties. Do you have a rough number of how many employees it would be to not have that risk item?
Boy, not off the top of my head. We evaluate kind of the major transaction cycles. Probably the easiest one to use as an example would be your general claims and disbursements. So if you've got, somebody in there that has the ability to initiate a transaction, is one of the people that's responsible for reviewing and approving that transaction, is responsible for getting it into the general ledger, is involved in kind of some of the internal control procedures like doing the monthly bank reconciliations, or either initiating or reviewing journal entries where you could change something once it's in there. The more one individual is involved in those processes, the greater the risk from that internal control standpoint. And since you only, you have basically two people that do the bulk of your general ledger work there, it's hard for a small organization like yours to really get rid of that entirely. That makes sense?
No, totally get it.
Okay. Any other questions?
Not this time.
Okay. Then I will briefly go through a few of the financial results for 2022 fiscal year. The city maintains two types of funds, your governmental funds and your enterprise or business type funds. This first table here goes through the change in your fund balances for your governmental funds. So this is your general, special revenue, debt service, capital project funds. These are your funds that are financed with your tax levy and other often intergovernmental revenues, things of that nature. So your total fund balances across all of these funds ended the year at about $25.5 million. That was up just under $5 million from the year before. We've got it kind of broken out two different ways up on top. We are showing it by the classification of fund balances, how they're reported, and then down below we show the major funds that it's being reported in. So kind of focusing on the change, kind of the biggest areas of increase, your committed fund balances went up by about $4.1 million, a little more than that. That's where most of the change came. The bulk of that has to do with resources that are being accumulated for capital projects. You've got some bond proceeds in there for some projects. You've got both the Spruce Street and parking lot projects that you started were funded partially with bonds. You've got trunk funds for most of your major enterprise funds, replacement of your infrastructure where you're collecting some developer fees in there that build up for future replacement and repair of those goods. And then also you've made some transfers during the year from some of your enterprise funds to pay for some of their portion of these projects. So Most of that increase you're seeing in the Spruce Street Capital Project Fund, or in the non-major capital project funds are down towards the bottom in that lower part of the presentation. Also, your unassigned fund balances went up by about $438,000. That's mainly your general fund. That's where the bulk of your unassigned fund balance is, unless you have a negative fund balance in any other fund. So that had to do with the results of operations from your general fund for the year, which we'll kind of drill down on right now. So this graph shows your general fund financial position for the last 5 fiscal years in terms of your year-end fund balance, which are the blue bars, and your year-end cash balance, which are the yellow bars. So at the end of the 2022 fiscal year, you had about $6.6 million in total cash, which is about $1 million higher than the year before. And your fund balance was about $7.8 million. That went up by about $500,000 from your 2022 operations. I'm excluding from that the prior period adjustment we talked about earlier. That kind of goes as an adjustment to your beginning fund balance. You had a break-even budget, so you're about $500,000 higher than projected in your ending fund balance. Your unassigned portion of that fund balance represents about 46.4% of your total budgeted outflows for 2023, which is expenditures plus transfers coming out of the general fund. In your 2023 budget, your policy is to maintain that at about 40 to 50%, so you're right in line with your policy as far as where your year-end fund balance ended up. General fund revenues for 2022 were about $14.7 million. You were about 2.5%, $366,000 roughly over budget. Couple of things to point out there. Your intergovernmental revenues were about $313,000 higher than budget. That was mainly in grants for your Minnesota state aid streets and also some police and fire funding that were a little higher than budget. Charges for services were also about $240,000 higher than budget. A lot of that was fire service charges, some fees for engineering, and then your other revenues, or all other revenues as it's titled there, was about $217,000 under budget. And I just want to kind of call that out, and this is going on at almost all of our governmental clients. Because of what was going on in the market last year, interest rates were going up, but if you were holding investments that had a longer term, window there, be they CDs or government securities or whatever, the market values of those were going down if you bought them at a lower interest rate than was currently available. So we are seeing a fair value adjustment that you have to recognize as you hold those over the life of those investments on your financial statements. But as it's your general policy to hold them until the maturity date, in the end, you're going to get the par value for them. But over time, if that market price goes up or down, you have to adjust that every year to that current fair value should you have to liquidate. So that's what's going on with that. And we had a lot of our cities that kind of had what you had this year, where you're actually showing a negative investment income because of that fair value change. Your general fund expenditures were just under $14 million for the year. You were very close to budget on the expenditure side. Also, you're about 1% under budget, roughly $149,000. Most of the variance was in personnel costs. Your public safety and public works functions were both about $125,000 to $130,000 under budget because you had some unfilled positions there that you'd budgeted for either for all or part of the year. And then Parks and Rec was about $100,000 over budget because you had 2 positions added there that were not in the budget. The other fund type that the city maintains is enterprise funds. These are the funds where you're financing them with user charges, and that's intended to be financing the full cost of these funds, including equipment and infrastructure replacement. 5 of the 6, as you can see at the bottom there, are what I would kind of refer to as a utility fund type, your sewer, water, solid waste, street light, et cetera. They're very capital intensive. So you see up at the top there, out of $69 million in that position, about $48 million, or roughly 70%, is your investment in those capital assets that you're using to generate the water, sewer amenities that you're providing to the city. That was a decrease of about $2.3 million from the year before. Most of that was in that investment in capital assets due to depreciation. You didn't add a whole lot of new assets in the enterprise funds in 2022. As you can see from the breakout by fund below, you did have negative changes in the net position at the end of the day in most of these funds, but that's because of the amount that you transferred out for the most part. Most of these did have positive operating results for the year, but you transferred about $3.3 million out of these enterprise funds to support the activity of the general fund and the other governmental funds that we looked at first. The one exception there is your solid waste fund. You're closing that down. That process started in 2022. You had very little revenue in there. I think you had one client maybe where you had, by contract, had to continue to serve at a particular price where they were still paying you. Otherwise, that's basically moved for the most part to a private hauler. You did make the decision year before last to pay part of the cost for your customers for the first quarter of 2022 to keep them from kind of getting double billed in the same quarter. So you did see a decrease in that fund equity going through this year, but you still do have about $1.9 million in that position positive at the end of the year that you'll be looking to kind of close that fund out and decide what to do with that in 2023. The one fund I did put an extra graph in here is the one that's not a utility fund. That's your liquor operation fund. That fund had total sales for the year of about $6.4 million. That was an increase of about 14%, roughly $766,000. Most of that growth came at your downtown store because you did have a new site there, which improved business, but also in 2021, you were moving from the old location. The store wasn't fully open all year, so you're seeing that kind of bounce back from being fully moved into an operation all year in the new position, or in the new store. You did have operating income total of about $448,000 in that fund for the year, and you transferred about $143,000 out of this fund for general operations, and also you have kind of a policy of making some transfers to finance some community projects every year out of this fund, and that's what you took out of there in 2022. And the last table I wanted to go through is a statement of net position. This is actually the very first presentation in your full financial statement. It takes all of the fund information we just went through and puts it in a single presentation, and kind of the translation here, the business type activities pretty much is dollar for dollar what we talked about in your enterprise fund. The change here is in what's the top part labeled governmental activities. That relates to your governmental funds, but because they're on a different basis of accounting in those fund financial statements, you don't report long-term capital assets, the bonds that you have outstanding to finance the purchase or construction of those assets, long-term pension liabilities or other long-term employee benefits there. That your governmental funds are kind of only reporting current assets and liabilities. So what this does is it puts them both on the same basis of accounting. It gives you kind of a longer term picture of your financial position and how that changed year to year. So here you see at the end of the year total, you had a net position of about $131 million. That changed by about $854,000 from the year before in total. As I mentioned, the business type activity changed there, the negative $2.2 million. That corresponds with the changes we saw in your enterprise funds, and that's mainly because they transferred about $3.3 million up to those governmental activities. You're seeing the change there in governmental activities. The restricted net position there, the increase of about $715,000. A lot of that had to do with the amount of state aid street receivable that you have that's been allocated to the city, but you haven't used it yet. That's one of the changes in accounting from the modified accrual to accrual. You recognize that in the funds when you spend it. You recognize it here when it's allocated to you. So that's mainly a receivable sitting there that you haven't used yet in the funds. And then that unrestricted increase of about $2.2 million. Mainly that's due to the increases we talked about before, and you're committed for capital projects and some of those capital project funds, and also in that unassigned fund balance in your general fund. But that was cut back a little bit by the changes in some of those other liabilities. Your state pension liabilities both increased because the funding levels of both PERA state plans were lower in this year's financial statements than they were the year before. You have to report your proportionate share of those two statewide plan underfundings in this statement of net position. So that's where that comes through in that unrestricted net position line. That was everything I typically go through from a number standpoint. I threw a lot of information at you, or if there are questions, anything you want me to get into any further. I'm sorry, I went over my 2.3 minutes or whatever it was, probably quite a bit, but.
All good. Thank you, sir. Katie, any questions?
No, I was trying to take notes throughout to kind of some of the things I want to review, and I can certainly send those to you or Chris in the future here. But no, I appreciate all of this. Most of it is beyond my understanding, but I am doing my best, and every year it gets a little easier to understand. So no, but I appreciate your time and you coming in. And
absolutely.
Steve?
Chris, I appreciate all the work that you did, and obviously the collaboration with our auditing team. For the average resident that's listening, I guess I'm just kind of asking for your comment on this. You know, they might see that fund balance and say, well, you know, that proves that the city is just kind of overtaxing us. But from an accounting standpoint, and really from I would say risk management city operations standpoint, it's really almost necessary to have a fund balance, kind of like you would think about a reserve for your house to cover expenses that might come up. And actually that also helps from a bond rating standpoint too, correct?
That's correct. And one of the things that I am not sure how to back up.
And that was a slide you presented about four slides ago or so.
Well, you had about 46% of your next year's revenues, or I'm sorry, expenditures and transfers out in your ending fund balance. But what I also wanted to point out is a big part of that has to do with cash flow. You are very dependent on your property tax levy as far as being your major source of revenue in your general fund. And as you kind of intimated, having enough fund balance or that represents cash in the bank to operate until you get those tax settlements in is an important part of your cash flow also, because those get collected in May, November mostly. So if you think about it, if you're getting 80+% of your revenue through those collections, and you're not getting paid any of those in cash until May and June, or then again until October, November, you have to have cash reserves to operate until those revenues come in. So that's a big reason. I believe the state auditor had a recommendation years ago as far as fund balance being maintained for working capital, and it was in that, I believe it was 40 to 50% range. It's pretty close to what you have for a policy.
Thank you.
Nick?
Similar bond question, I guess, in that, excuse me, fair market value of the ladder, your investment ladder that we talked about, how it's fluctuating right now and everyone's below. Can that negatively impact the bond rating currently, or is that kind of a thing where since you're not doing anything with it, it really wouldn't come into?
I guess I don't know if it would impact the bond rating or not. I imagine they would look at it, and I would basically explain that the Fed increased the rates so high, so fast that ladder portfolios couldn't keep up with it. I mean, I can't buy my investments fast enough to keep up with the market. I mean, I don't have the cash to do that. So, and we do have several investments. A large part of the portfolio goes out to at least 5 or 6 years, and the longer the maturity, the greater the loss.
Right.
Since I've been here, I've only been going out 18 to 24 months. And that's as far as out as I'll go, because I'm hitting targets in my cash flow model to fill those buckets up. I do know that the bond rating agencies definitely look at your fund balance policy and where your fund balance is at, because I've run into that before. So I think with our fund balance being right in the middle between 40 and 50%, I think we're sitting in a really good position.
Okay. Good enough.
Holly?
I really don't have any questions at this time. I just a note of thanks to Chris for taking his time with me a couple months back to go through the accounting process here. So I was able to really wrap my head around much more of what was being explained today. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions. It's been interesting, the last 4 or 5 years to watch the changes in the community and just, the how it transfers over into your financials, right? So you transition out of solid waste, the monies that are being set aside in the fund for the water treatment and the water tower, and just to see how it changes with the liquor store and the increase and the net profit percentage increases. It's interesting to see that change over the last 4 or 5 years, and the constant in that is that we are moving in a positive direction. I was reminded when I started that there was a time not too long ago that we basically had to borrow to cover payroll, right? And our prior administrator made it a point to make sure that would never happen again. And so to stay very strict on our practices and keep things tight so that we don't run into that issue, because we are so property tax levy dependent. A nice healthy general fund balance and making sure the city continue to operate in a fiscally responsible way. So very good report, Chris. Well done to the team. Yes. With that, we'd look for a motion to accept the auditor's report.
Motion.
Motion by Holly,
Second?
second by Katie. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Porter,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Hoyt,
Yes.
Councilmember Burnett,
Yes.
Councilmember Lean.
Yes.
Thank you, sirs.
Thank you.
All right, roundtable time. Nick?
Thank you to the organizers of the Do Run. I had a great time with my son. He is much faster than me now, and I'm kind of sad because I don't think I can keep up with him anymore, even though he's only 8. Be safe this week. Lots of stuff to do, lots of stuff to see. Get out and enjoy your community and be nice.
Holly?
Ditto.
Nothing else?
Truly, I am looking forward to seeing a lot of Farmington faces and a lot of neighborhood community faces out at Farmington Do Days this week. It's going to be a great time. Mother Nature will not win. She will play nice in the sandbox. She will be cooperative and give us beautiful weather and all of those things that we need for a fantastic time. And yeah, I'm just excited.
Thank you. Katie?
Well, with that said, we're under an air pollution advisory, so it's going to be super hot, but definitely worth coming out, especially Friday, right, Justin? The water ball, thank you. I was like, yep, I'm gonna blank on this. Super fun. I mean, every year we come out and, you know, if you have to dump some cold water on your neck or whatever you gotta do, come out and have fun. And so hopefully everybody stays safe, and definitely a lot more kids out on the road, and some of them causing trouble and some of them playing nice. And but just a reminder for everybody to watch out for the kiddos and the uptick of traffic throughout the day. So that's all I have.
Steve?
All right, I got a slew of items. This might take us past 5:30. I'm just kidding. Kelly, how many people actually did show up on Saturday?
We had 128 individuals run the races, 1 mile, 4 mile, and the half-mile junior jog.
Okay, cool. I don't know how we would, I was just kind of thinking to myself here, I wonder if it would be something to ponder, like a fallish kind of run. I don't know what you'd loop that in with, because I know the schools do some of that kind of stuff too, but appreciate your work there.
Turkey trot.
What?
Turkey trot.
That's, yeah, I do that. That's on Thanksgiving, yeah. Oh, but we could do one here.
That's
Oh my gosh, hello. Yes. First annual turkey trot in Farmington. That actually would be successful. Something to consider. Speaking of running, I do want to congratulate all the people that participated in Grandma's Marathon and Half Marathon this weekend. I was up there because my son ran, and very proud of him. He didn't qualify for Boston Marathon, but I'm sorry, 3:13 for a marathon's pretty speedy. But there were 21 Farmington residents that ran the marathon, some who qualified for Boston Marathon, which is the only marathon in the world that you can participate if you qualify. And then 16 ran the half marathon, so huge kudos to those folks. The next item is, Lynn is aware of this, and I don't even know that we could show the pictures, but it's viewable on Facebook, and I think it's just super cool. This is, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff like this that happens in Farmington, and unless you're on Facebook or happen to know about it, you're just not going to be aware of it. But Kim Borlick, who I know from my years working with her kids and, you know, kind of baseball parents, she, every Wednesday, and I don't know how she got the idea to do this, but every Wednesday, she invites, it's a group of city employees to her house for lunch. And we're not talking like, you know, kind of like bring your McDonald's and have lunch or Subway. We're talking about a prepared, amazing meal that she does for our city employees to have them over. It's kind of bonding time for them, and I'm sure they enjoy it. So huge thank you to Kim. So that is all I have.
Thank you, sir. Leah?
My turn already. I don't have any bison updates, but I do have just another reminder that the Secretary of State's office posts boards and commission vacancies and openings. So this is just another way people are interested in serving the public in kind of a lesser known fashion. Just go ahead and Google SOS for Secretary of State and then commission and board, and then you'll find the vacancies.
Thank you, ma'am. Lynn?
The City Council meeting and work session will be canceled for July 3rd, and our next meeting will be July 17th at the regular time.
Thank you. Shirley?
Actually don't have anything tonight.
You break the rule. All right, fair. Julie?
On the consent agenda, you approved the hiring of 4 paid-on-call firefighters. That's a big accomplishment. Those folks go through probably the most rigorous process we have in the city, maybe next to department heads, with testing and all of the physical abilities. And it's a large accomplishment for those folks. We're going to have them start on July 10th, so Justin can get them in before the annual party.
Thank you, ma'am. Deanna?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just to let you know, we will have a presence at due days to continue to get community input as part of our community vision. So we once again encourage the public to share their thoughts, and we're going to see where this process goes. So we'll see you there.
Thank you. John?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. So we had the pre-construction meeting for the Aiken Road improvements. You saw one of the fund balances was probably due to state aid construction funds being allocated to the city. We're using those funds to pay for that Aiken Road improvement, so that'll be drawn down and we'll get another allocation every year. The contractor, McNamara Contracting, indicates that they're going to start the work after July 4th with erosion control placement and traffic control placement. And then after that, they'll start the reclamation process and the construction activities. Spruce, if you've been out to Spruce Street, you've noticed a lot of concrete curbing and flat work going down, especially in front of Mackey Arena. I think that turned out very well with the pillars, and they'll keep going. They'll probably finish all the flat work this week and start Boulevard restoration. So that project is coming to a close with paving. The FAA and their storm sewer, that pipe just got in and they're still waiting for structures. So I will forewarn you that our contractor needs to complete their work, but the FAA may disturb a small part of that to put in structures whenever they show up, and that may be August, September, I'm not sure. They won't commit to a timetable. The cardboard bins, recycling bins are gone. They were gone last Friday morning. But we did in the organics have some items show up that the police department's been very kind to follow up with the individuals that place those items in there. Hopefully that won't happen again. But we've had no dumping outside where the bins were to date. We are doing tree trimming on the parade route. Not only tree trimming, but there's a few removals out there, so we want to be sure that that's all ready for the crowd and the vehicles that are going to be out there. And we'll be starting topographic surveys around the maintenance facility site. So if you see somebody working around there, that's in anticipation of the fuel island concept development and the retaining wall repairs. So a lot of things happening.
Real quick, as it pertains to Aiken, the start date, correct me if I'm wrong, seems a little bit behind from projected or close to close?
Mayor, it's close. There's not a lot of utility pipe work on that project. It's mostly superficial work. So they'll come in, do driveways, concrete work and whatnot. It's McNamara Contracting. They've also got the county's overlay projects, I think, which we've got a couple of those in the area, and they're right up Highway 3.
Yeah.
They can certainly do the work and the schedule that they've laid out for us, even if they start after the 4th.
They'll make school start?
They will make school start. That is in the contract.
Perfect.
We also had them not have any closures until school was done either. So it's we've looked at their schedule, discussed it at the pre-construction meeting, and think it's very doable. Our substantial completion date is actually mid-August. So
perfect. Good deal. Thank you, sir. Kelly?
We're excited to announce that the Open Door will be having free food pop-up event at the Rambling River Center next Tuesday, June 27th from 3 to 4:30 p.m. They do ask that you bring your own bags, and then it will be monthly thereafter, July 18th, August 15th, and September 19th. Same time frame, 3 to 4:30 p.m. at the Rambling River Center located at 325 Oak Street. Next Wednesday, June 28th, we have our second Music in the Park, Rambling River Park at 7 p.m. The Dakota Ramblers will be playing classic country. One of our former police department members, Kevin Mink, is in the band, so exciting to see Kevin perform with his band next Wednesday at the park. So come on out.
Thank you, ma'am. Chris?
We started departmental meetings to discuss each department's budget, so we're well into that process, and also I'll be reporting the financial results from the audit to the OSA as I have to do, as it's required every year to do that. So that's about it.
Thanks, sir. Chief?
Yeah, we're less than a month away from the 150th celebration, July 15th at the Dakota County Fairgrounds. Open house prior to that at the fire station starting at noon. Lots of raffle tickets left, lots of chances to win. Our firefighters will be out at due days selling raffle tickets. We'll be out there for water ball Friday night, so that starts at 4:30 p.m. on 3rd Street. Keep you nice and cool. Come down and spray the fire hose. So happy to see everyone out there.
There's fireworks at the 150th, right?
There should be, yeah.
Okay.
No, there will be.
Chief?
Yeah, everybody's touched on due days a fair amount. I'm gonna try not to be preachy about it, but I feel like I need to say just a few things. I was at Councilmember Burnett's, I think, that said, be nice. I'll echo that, be nice. There will be a ton of extra foot traffic out, obviously, throughout the downtown area, so I ask drivers to just be cognizant of that, slow down a little bit. Yeah, the downtown area is obviously going to be closed starting noon on Friday, but all the parking on the residential streets, there's going to be people popping out from between cars. Just slow down a little bit all weekend long. The parade route, obviously, everybody knows what that is. We're going to need cars cleared off of that for the cruise on Saturday night, and then for the parade on Sunday at noon. That's nothing new, but you don't want your car towed, and frankly, we don't want to tow it either because it's a large inconvenience for us. So that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, to hit on due days a little bit, again, this event was resurrected from COVID one day to a committee that was non-existent last year. And the committee put together a phenomenal event. Thousands of people attended, a lot of different offerings, new events. It felt like a good refresh. And for this year, we are going a little bit bigger. So we've added a block party Friday and Saturday, something for the teeners, just trying to hit all different demographics and ages, a little something for everyone. The weather should cooperate, it's going to be hot, but there is a plethora of events over the next 4 days. We still need volunteers though. Like, whether you give 30 minutes of your time or you give 2 hours of your time, I went back through it today and there are over 40 volunteer positions available for the block party inflatable oversight section alone. So I implore any and all to volunteer 1 hour. It takes 1 hour to help ensure that this event goes off as planned. The community rallied and supported through the Roundup campaigns, through both the liquor store and Polici, made it financially affordable. The wristbands are being sold for $5. We still need volunteers to oversee, ensure safety, ensure that, you know, kids don't stand for too long and work through these events. But this entire week and the events that will take place over this week are only possible because people put time and effort into the thing, and the thing needs more volunteers. So please call a friend, talk to a neighbor. If you have time to go down and hang out for 6 hours, show up a half hour early and volunteer for half an hour. Put your butt in the dunk tank. You know, help pick up trash after one of the events. Help empty trash cans throughout the event. Do something. Because without that, it puts a lot on a very small group of people that will sleep less than double-digit hours between Thursday night and Saturday night. So again, that's a major ask, and I would appreciate any and all help that we can get. Other than that, belated Happy Father's Day, and we won't see you again until after Independence Day, so happy early 4th of July. With that, we look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion by Katie.
Second.
Second by Steve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned at 5:38.
Hey, I have an ask.